Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Scott Mears. I'm the Global Field Marketing Manager at roambee and your host for today. At roambee, I'm responsible for generating new business and building the brand with our customers in the industry. A fun fact about me, just recently, I actually met Bill Murray twice in the same day in Chicago. What a lucky day that was. I was so, and the first time, so it was a very lucky day. Today, we're going to find out how IFCO, a global food and beverage reusable packaging container company, has found the missing piece in their supply chain and the impact it has had. In this webinar, we'll dive into IFCO's journey with this and discuss how we enable the rest of the industry to take advantage of this missing piece in our supply chain today. To make sure that we have a well-balanced and insightful conversation today, we have a panel that truly reaches every voice within supply chain. But before I get on to introducing everyone, just a few minor housekeeping rules. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a few different icons that can do a few different things. The first one you'll see is the raise the hand icon. You can actually ignore this icon. We're not going to use this to interact with today. You'll then see the chat icon. This is a fantastic icon to chat with one another. I've just seen Rob say hi. Hi there, Rob. In the chat icon, you can chat to one another. You can chat to the panelists. Please do chat to one another throughout, but please do not ask your questions here. We'll not see your questions here. There's actually another icon, a Q&A icon, where you can ask your questions. And again, they'll go directly to us. And don't worry about waiting until the end of the webinar. We will stop for Q&A breaks throughout the webinar. So if you've got a pressing question, just ask it there. It'll wait there and we'll answer it as we get to it. And finally, the three dots icon at the very last one. If you are hard of hearing or just appreciate subtitles, you can actually enable subtitles on there as well. So now we've got that over and done with, I would like to go ahead and introduce our amazing speakers today. I would first like to welcome onto the panel Josh Taylor. Joshua Taylor is the Global Digital Solutions Manager at IFCO. Josh has 20 years industry experience in operations, sales and account management, asset management, digital transformation, and 8 years experience implementing digital solutions. He has worked for globally trading companies such as Foodworks, Chep, Rehrig Pacific Company, and Silgan. And for 11 years, he has been a father to his amazing 11-year-old twins. Secondly, I'd like to welcome onto the panel Tim Debus, the President and CEO of the Reusable Packaging Association. Tim is focused on promoting the use and value of reusable transport packaging systems and advancing the common business interests of members of the Reusable Packaging Association. He has 20 plus years of experience in bringing to market new technologies and leading industry initiatives to improve the production and supply chain of agricultural commodities. Before jumping into the reusable packaging industry, he was the Vice President at IFCO for 7 years. An interesting fact about Tim is he's very familiar with bananas. And the reason for this is he was the Vice President at IFCO for 7 years. And in his time there, he led the banana industry trade association, spending a lot of time in banana farms, developing a reusable plastic container for bananas. I love learning this fact about you, Tim, because I myself have been linked to bananas in the past. I wonder if you can take a guess why. Yeah. But, I wonder if the audience can. But throughout this year, attending events, I've heard this same name a few times. They've gone up to me and go, "Oh, are you part of the Savannah Bananas?" Savannah Bananas. And I had to look it up, and it's a baseball team. And so we're both linked to bananas in some way. So we've got a lot of banana power on the webinar today, but we're not talking about bananas today. Finally, I'd like to welcome onto the panel Scott Hurley, the Vice President and Product Marketing Strategy at roambee. Scott has been with roambee since 2020 and has more than 20 years of experience applying location intelligence technologies as products and solutions for transportation logistics industries. Prior to roambee, Scott held leadership positions at Uptake, Here Technologies, and several geographic information system consulting companies. Outside work, Scott is on the board of his son's baseball league, and one of his regular hobbies is looking for his reading glasses around the house. Oh, he still hasn't found them. Oh, there we go. There we go.
You know, Scott, unscripted for baseball, I coached my son's team last year. In the last game we held unofficial, we played by Savannah Banana rules, and the kids absolutely loved it. It was so much fun.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Another banana power. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Welcome to all our speakers on today. I welcome you all.
Thank you.
I want to dive straight into it. We've got an hour here, and I really want to dive into it. And I'm going to start off with you, Josh. Firstly, what I want us to do is I want us to identify the challenges the industry faced that drove IFCO to find the missing piece in their supply chain. So, Josh, I'm going to throw the first question to yourself, and that is, what are the challenges that drove you towards finding that missing piece in your supply chain?
I think that what a lot of poolers can experience is the primary benefit that you have is availability of product. You know, the last thing you want to have happen to you is you have customers on the program and you're not able to satisfy their order demands and meet those expectations. So for us, having available product leads into an asset efficiency consideration or conversation, and having inefficient assets or a lack of efficiency is a big driver for our business. And so what we were looking for is opportunities to understand where inefficiency occurs within our supply chain in North America, so we could take better, discrete, direct actions to improve and eliminate those inefficiencies or reduce the inefficiencies, thereby ultimately allowing us to better serve our customers here in North America. And that's a significant journey for IFCO and a lot of poolers. And historically, that task is placed on a field asset management team. And that team is responsible for identifying areas of that inefficiency within the supply chain by contacting customers and having idle inventory returned, or understanding where loss, theft is occurring within the market. And that can be somewhat of a guessing game, right? And so again, that visibility, that's the missing piece, is that visibility for IFCO as a pooler to understand where those inefficiencies or opportunities to improve our operation, where those exist.
And was there any big problem that really drove you that you found was a real struggle for IFCO for a continued time? Was there anyone you would single out?
And I think for IFCO specifically, so a lot of us have experience from a pooling standpoint in North America because we might have worked with a pallet pooler in the past. With pallets, you certainly have inefficiency, but it's a different type. A pallet is a large asset, kind of difficult to misplace or potentially steal. With an RPC, like we have at IFCO, it's collapsible by design for the logistical efficiency that provides to the marketplace. But because of that collapsibility, and because it's a resin-based product, like there are certainly opportunities for theft to occur. And when assets go from a grower to a retail DC and then to a retail store, a lot of times there's a lack of controls at a retail store location, and generally a lack of understanding of the importance that a reusable plastic asset provides to the fresh food supply chain. And so that component for us as IFCO, the lack of controls historically at the retail point of sale, an opportunity for us to try and investigate further, and what leads into what we believe would be drivers of inefficiency for us in North America.
Interesting. And I want to take it a bit further with you, Tim. I would love to know, are the challenges that Josh has mentioned here, are these challenges you find are common in the industry, and are there any you feel we need to add here as well?
Fortunately, it's very common throughout the industry as far as effective management of your assets from a variety of different paths in which they're either lost or they're leaking through gaps in the supply chain. In fact, our industry, if you aggregate many different markets, can put the number of up to almost $1 billion of lost value annually as a result of assets that go missing outside of the managed pool, or they're being stolen in terms of theft right out of their use applications. In fact, the American Bakers Association even narrowed that down for us recently with some data from their own baking industry that says they spend $10 million a year in the U.S. In just replacement costs associated with stolen plastic crates for baking items. And so if you roll that up and look at all the different market sectors that deploys reusable packaging in their supply chains, it grows quite quickly as far as that impact in the marketplace. And so it's very common, and asset management is the one common area of our industry that we all can unite, we all can rally around, we all can work on, either through collaborative purposes and several different aspects that we can talk about in this webinar. And it's an area that I think we need to do a better job, frankly, in terms of having products that we invest in, that we build, that we extract value from in their use, that we're able to protect them more effectively in the products. And theft is a big one. I think if you broke it down to how these are, why these are going missing, I think the theft is a very large portion of that. In fact, we make high quality products. These are resin-based materials, whether it's HDPE or polypropylene, and it's high-grade resin material. It's lacking impurities. It doesn't have contaminants, and so therefore there's a higher value placed on these from say an illegal recycling ring. They can get more because of the purity of the plastic in which they're stealing and regrinding and selling into the open market. And so as we make great products using high-grade materials, that just makes it more of a target as far as theft and using the material for resale in the marketplace. And so we've just got to be very cognizant that that's occurring, and as an industry working together through our constituents, our members, and reaching out and more coalition building as far as solving the problem.
Good if I unmuted myself. Obviously, something we're all used to now with COVID-19 and all been locked in our houses on Teams and being muted and not knowing. Yes, it's very much an interesting. Theft it's sadly so big within the industry, and like you said, you make a great point with the more money we're putting into these containers, these assets, it's just more profitable for these thieves to steal these assets. And I would love to learn now from you, Josh, is what have you done in the past to try and overcome these challenges that you've stated today?
Sure. I think historically it's a responsibility that was placed on the field team that we have at IFCO. Asset management, certainly a collaboration with the sales team, being the commercial face with our customers, and simply highlighting the opportunities that are out there for us to take action on. So what part of that is missing for us is having a database conversation with our customers and our participants in this closed loop supply chain that we offer, and having data to help remove some of the emotion out of it, to say nobody is pointing a finger, because that's a key thing that we need to always keep in mind when we're talking technology. It's not about grabbing data so that we can say you're good or you're bad. It's here's data so that we understand where the problems exist and where they're at, and then having a baseline for us to track opportunities that we can then associate the improvement to. So for us, it's historically been a field assault if you will. So going out and making sure that we have a presence, and we're demonstrating the fact that from an IFCO perspective, we're always making sure that the communities know that this is an IFCO asset. It's owned by IFCO always, and we that way we always have a legal claim to our assets, which is an important thing for a lot of poolers to make sure that we always have. It's a key part of the pooling program. But there are some inherent problems with that because it's a bit inefficient. It's time consuming because you're traveling and you're going out and you're visiting places, some of them random and some of them not, based on intelligence. And that's a hurdle for us to overcome. And we just knew that there could be a better, more efficient way to start tackling this problem at IFCO.
Absolutely. And coming to you, Tim, with how have you seen the industry overcome these challenges as well?
There's a variety of different, I guess, tools in the toolbox for the industry to work on to overcome the challenges, and certainly with our individual members as part of the RPA, but other parties out there who are managing operations with their reusable packaging products. And we look at the collaborative approach, and we see that as well with competitors in the marketplace working together on solving potentially leaks with their customers in which there's environments or conditions with theft is occurring. And so it's great to see that this is an area that even competitors can work together and provide some collective force in order to solve some of the problems that are taking place with lost or stolen assets. The other is what we try and promote is looking at these assets as a valued commodity, or as something that actually has a benefit to the operation, and it takes some education behind that. There are a lot of users, let's say, that do not properly safeguard reusable packaging assets, whether it's pallets, bulk bins, containers, and we've seen a stark difference of companies that deploy cages and locked outer structures in which these products are being housed, and that they are able to shore up the supply chain and eliminate gaps that may occur. Whereas in contrast, companies that put them, say, behind the back and they're open, they're more subject to being stolen. And we've even seen that. And this is not, in the middle of the night theft operation. This could occur in the middle of the broad daylight where trucks pull up and start unloading. And so safeguarding through physical barriers is an area that I think as an industry we can continue to educate and communicate on the importance of role in terms of prevention of theft. The other one is public policy. This is an area that I think it can be stronger and needs to be, especially across the country and other areas. In fact, we've seen most recently in Texas where there's been an active program called the Operation Stop, Stop Theft of Plastic Products, the acronym STOP. And this is for a long time has been working, with the legislature on ways that they can strengthen enforcement, strengthen prosecution of illegal theft rings. In fact, even in 2019, the American Bakers Association helped lead the way, along with the Texas Retailers Association, to pass a new law of Theft, Loss, and Prevention Act that really puts new measures of criminality associated with theft of these assets, but also importantly, civil penalties that can be recovered so that law enforcement and prosecution can, definitely move quickly and effectively, as we've seen in a lot of case studies. That doesn't exist in a lot of places. You may have some law enforcement, but the actual prosecution falls flat in terms of pursuing, maximum penalties, let's say. So the deterrent associated with public policy, I think, is an important one. And then finally, from an industry view, continued support for technology development. At the end of the day, the visibility that Josh mentioned earlier becomes the important game-changing capability with the management of these assets. It used to be, I mentioned the Operation Stop program, where had a retainer, a private investigator that would go out and actually sit out and monitor and watch and then do some follow-up. But with technology, it could be as simple as, hey, we're getting readings of these crates now outside of their loop, and they're in the neighborhood, or they're in, and then the investigator can go right out and shortcut what ultimately would be a long-consuming investigation into something that's very direct in finding out where these operation rings are. And so technology plays a critical role in something that is changing, I think, the opportunity for companies to protect their assets. And ultimately, when they are moving outside of the controlled conditions, they can quickly move into recovery mode in terms of bringing those assets back into their operations. And so it's an exciting time to have that type of visibility that allows for a more real-time and more effective recovery of assets that are stolen from their intended use.
That was a fantastic answer, very, very insightful, and I love the pull of the cases as well. That was really interesting to really visualize what you were saying there. Before we jump into real-time visibility solutions, I wonder if you, Scott, you could bring it home a little bit with the actual, because we've talked about the challenges and how we've overcome them and what we're doing to overcome them. What are some? Could you just? And I know you spoke about this at the PAC Expo in the Learning Center, which was a fantastic talk. Could you just take us through sort of the different sections of solutions out there that are trying to deal with these problems?
Sure. And I think it's instructive. The way to think about it is, first, what is the problem you're trying to solve for the customer, understanding that, and then identifying and deploying the right technology to do so. Now, roambee has a technology, IoT technology, largely that we're deploying for this case, but that's not always going to be the case for customers that want to gain visibility to their assets. So it's important to understand the benefits and the limitations of different technologies. I think it really has been a journey for us as well, working with IFCO through the years, because I think, Josh said at the beginning, looking for efficiencies. That's something that you only find over time. And so initially, problem statement was loss of assets. And we knew by deploying this visibility tracking technology that we'd be able to help with that. At least we thought that we would. But it's that accumulation of data over time and understanding the cycles and the different components of their ecosystem and the dwell time, and how the ability to measure and then take action to do something about that has provided much more value than I think we even thought would have been possible with this type of solution. So it's important to understand now what the end goal is in mind, but it's also important, I think, as a preface when we get into real time, is that it's easy to think about, okay, you're throwing a sensor on a device, but it takes a lot more than that to make it successful. So yes, you do need a device, and it needs to be able to fit. It needs to be able to withstand the conditions it operates in. You want to make sure that it can ideally not be stolen off of it or even seen. It can withstand the cleaning process. It can fit the form factor flush, so it doesn't impact the ability to put product in it. It needs to be able to connect and have the right connectivity depending on where it's operating, including sometimes in very rural areas. Has to have the right battery life. Those are all considerations for the device, but even more so than that, you have to have a intelligent platform that can communicate both ways with these devices using firmware and control the ping rates and understand how to associate this asset to where it is and what type of product it's moving. You need to have applications that allow you to define zones and set things up to then create the analytics on all the data, both real-time and historical data, that can really then start to yield the benefits of it. And the last piece that often is missing is the processes, the people in the processes. Anytime you're dealing with tracking of physical assets like this, especially when they persist, it's not just one journey. You need to think about who is going to attach them, when they're going to go, how frequently are they going to be, how long is the battery going to last, any number of things that you really have to find through trial and error. And so by working with IFCO over the last couple of years, we feel that not only certainly that they've been able to gain value from it, but in general, our offering to the market has certainly been strengthened through this relationship.
Yeah. So Scott, I want to build on that because, I haven't done a good job of explaining how IFCO came to partner with roambee to begin with. And you touched on it, and I want to drive home that point. And IFCO is unique in the sense that it can be the primary packaging for produce. And because it is collapsible in nature, that requires a device that is quite small, relatively speaking, to a lot of GPS devices that are on the market that have the requisite battery performance that we need because of the pooling reusable model. It can't be a battery that's going to last 90 days. That doesn't meet the terms or the conditions that our supply chain operates within. So first and foremost, when we're attaching a device, it has to be in a food grade enclosure. So in collaboration with roambee over the past 3+ years, we've created that food grade enclosure to attach to our crates seamlessly. And then from a deployment standpoint, there is absolutely thought and intention that goes into how and where and when we deploy assets at IFCO from a GPS standpoint. Whether it's a gut understanding of there's pockets of inefficiency geographically based, seasonally based, or customer based. And so you're looking to try and gain more insight and visibility into these specific areas. And you're doing so again through a pooled platform or a pooling model. And once you deploy that initial device, now it's natively going through the supply chain. And so you're collecting additional data, but it's important to have a process and control and intent mapped out to maximize that initial value when you're deploying these. And then the last 2 points Scott mentioned are really key for us. Before there's a lot of pre-work before we even deployed one device. And that pre-work consisted of geo-fencing all of our known locations from a customer standpoint. And that is a key thing to do to make sure that you understand what we'll call we have inside IFCO a happy path. A happy path consists of it departs from an IFCO location, it arrives at a grower, it then goes on to a retailer, and it comes back to IFCO, and that's the happy path. It's the perfect route that every pooling partner wants to participate in. It's the most efficient, and it adds the most value to all of the participants. So in order to understand what the deviations exist that Tim touched on when assets deviate from the happy path, as it were, you need to geofence everything in your market. And so collaborating with roambee, having that platform that is taking all of these locations, converting them to the proper lat long, and that then allows us to provide context to the data, which is the last point. So, Scott mentioned what we're attaching to. So absolutely. So every device we attach, we associate to the size of the RPC, and we know where it's going and to who it's going, and then ultimately who it comes back from. And so that context is very valuable and important to fully understanding what you're seeing in the supply chain, but then also being able to take action on the information that's being generated. Those are key points that I'd be a disservice if we didn't call it, because there is a ton of pre-work that is associated with this, and then a significant amount of analysis that comes on from a human standpoint that is really supplemented and augmented by the platform that roambee has. So Scott, it's key what you're talking about, because those are real challenges specifically for IFCO. Maybe not so much for a pallet, or maybe not so much for an IBC pooler with much larger assets, but for us specifically, form factor and battery life and food grade, those were big considerations for us.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great addition to Scott's comments there. And I'm actually going to pause for a Q&A here. We are going to stop throughout the webinar. The question that comes through from Paul, I feel like we have answered this, and very much are going to carry on to answer this, Paul. So don't worry, we have answered a lot of the answer already, and we'll carry on to answer that throughout the webinar. Do ask your questions. I did notice someone did raise their hand. We're not using the icon, so if you want to send a question, do use the Q&A icon. You can send a question, or if you've got something you want to say, to the attendees that just use the chat box. So use the Q&A for the questions, not the chat box. Chat is just to speak to one another. But I'll go ahead and ask a question myself. Now I've got the chance, I've got you all on the webinar, I can ask you some questions. To you, Josh, what out of the approach, I know we've kind of dived into the real-time visibility already, but I do want to discuss about the other approaches that IFCO tried. I want to, because there'll be companies on this that are trying these approaches, and they may have never tried real time before, and they may be trying other solutions out there, other approaches. What was an approach where you were quite surprised that it just didn't work the way you felt it was going to work?
I think so. So one, it'll be a historical answer, but two, it's I don't have all of the data from an IFCO perspective. So I was fortunate enough to join IFCO a little over 3 years ago, and serendipitously that aligned with IFCO North America's desire to gain this additional visibility, and that process of understanding the available partners in the marketplace from a real-time visibility standpoint was just getting underway. But historically, from an IFCO perspective, certainly you have something like a VisiDot system. So you're applying a label to a crate, and you're looking to track that movement of the crate as it goes through the supply chain. From a global standpoint, a lot of our assets globally are 2D data matrix barcode enabled, serialized. That's something that a lot of companies will work towards. Some of the dilemmas, though, is it requires line of sight for scanning. You have to have a back end that's able to manage that. You're maintaining a lot of hardware, and a lot of times that's only focused on your four walls, and so you miss out on what's going on outside of your four walls, and that's the key. And there's not a whole lot of technologies historically that are going to provide the value of real-time visibility like roambee has brought to IFCO over the last few years now. But that's a real challenge. It was a technological barrier for us to overcome, and then part of that challenge touches on, it's an OpEx and a CapEx. There's a significant amount of money that's going to be spent to acquire and then manage and then upkeep and ultimately deploy and sift through that data. And so that's a hurdle for a lot of companies to, one, gain the opportunity or just secure the right to have that money spent and allocated towards this kind of program, but also to have the wherewithal, as Scott mentioned previously. It takes time to get scale and data, and for a pooling provider, the supply chain is not always clean. It's quite dirty, and so you have a lot of different variations of what a completed loop looks like, and so it takes time to acquire a significant amount of data so you can make more informed decisions. And so sometimes some firms lose sight of this, or the payback isn't there fast enough, and programs are canceled, sadly, before they're able to really deliver the value that everybody expects and hopes for.
Josh, if I could just build on that question with my own, one of the initial objections we often get when we introduce the topic of real-time tracking for reusable packaging is the value of our assets are too low to consider tracking. What was your thinking on that before, and maybe how's that evolved?
I mean, certainly, if you're looking at it singularly, it's not an ROI that makes sense. The device costs far more than a single asset costs us. What you need to look at, and Tim alluded to this with the American Baking Association, when you look at it in aggregate, there's a significant amount of inefficiency, loss, damage. There's idle inventory, which is awful for a pooling company to have idle inventory. And when you look at it from that standpoint, the ROI is much more favorable, assuming that you have the right device with the right capabilities and the proper foundation to manage and action the information and the data that will be acquired through the application of the real-time tracking. And so that's helped us to have a leadership team that is open to that and patient for the team to work through that. and allocate the requisite funds to finance it. There's certainly there's a significant amount of trust placed in the asset management team at IFCO to spend wisely, because it's not an inexpensive endeavor. But the ROI is certainly there, and I think for our benefit, IFCO certainly demonstrated that the ROI exists for us for the application of the real-time tracking.
And Josh, just to chime in on that, is, what we've been talking mostly about is the ROI pertaining to the recovery of lost assets, or the safeguarding of assets that could become lost at some point. But there's that whole other area that visibility brings to your business, and that is the more efficient or optimization of your management of those assets, where you can get into more effective distribution and more predictive analyses on positioning of assets in order to meet the market functions and the timing that's required. And so when you start looking at the value proposition of creating the visibility with technology in terms of asset management, it goes in two different buckets, right? It's controlling the assets, but it's also optimizing them, optimizing them from pool velocity and other capabilities, especially when you've got multiple parts like a wash service center. When you know what's coming in, you can plan that service center accordingly in terms of the number of people, the number of wash lines, the number of runs, if you've got visibility as to what is coming its way. And so that's where I think, as you noted, Josh, in that level of insight becomes really attractive and really exciting from a return on the investment.
I'm loving the flow of conversation here, and I do want to plug as well the ROI calculator that was recently published by the Reusable Packaging Association, which was published at the Pack Expo. So this is a great tool. Roambee also have calculators, so there are calculators out there that you can use to really identify that very quickly. So I do recommend to check that out. I want to come back to you, Scott, and I want to know what is it you were looking for in IFCO to make this a success?
So building on what Josh said in terms of how it can take a while to get enough data to understand and generate the analytics to make it actionable. What we really needed was a champion, and Josh was that champion, someone who could shepherd internally their organization through understanding what the capital investment was up front, or even OpEx investment, and where we're going, and have the patience to see how the data can and will light up their system, especially if you're dealing with theft events, for example. If you do a pilot for a month and there was maybe nobody tried to steal your stuff in that 1 month, and then you might say, well, it's a failure, right? But it's only a value when it actually happens. And so having the champion, and then also taking a very proactive approach on understanding what they need to make this actionable. Any analytics, whether we're talking about for reusable packaging or anywhere, if it's not operational, it's not worth very much. If you can't take action on an individual signal or on the analytics, if you look at it just once a month and say, oh, that's interesting, there's a 3% difference, people don't get a lot of value out of that. But if it can actually work into your business processes and allow you to do things differently, hour by hour, day by day, week for week, it does have real value. And Josh and IFCO did take that approach to integrate this into their business processes and brought us in to what they were thinking, so that we can make sure that we were building the right tools with the right outputs that will enable them to take that type of action based on what the data was providing. So just being open about their ecosystem, understanding their problems, understanding what is of value to them, what's not of value to them, and being very collaborative, I think is what we needed, and why this was a success.
What you say there seems to be ringing true throughout the webinar is really identifying the problem that you have and identifying exactly what you're trying to tackle, making sure that you put a lot of time into that planning piece, not just running into it. That is something I've noticed throughout the answers, is something that needs to be done. before you just go running into any solution. And I know we've sort of probably got it a little bit ahead of ourselves. We've dived into some quite a lot about what roambee are currently doing and what you're achieving at IFCO. But I would love to just sort of highlight some specific pain points that you've overcome. So, Josh, if you could just sort of give us some challenges that what you were achieving, what are you achieving now that you weren't before today?
I think certainly one of the biggest benefits is, from an achievement standpoint, is we have visibility where we didn't before. We always knew who we shipped an asset to, and we always knew who returned an asset. We rarely knew what happened in between those two events. And so having a real-time sensor that we are able to attach to the crates discreetly and provide that visibility for that part of our supply chain is critical to our success, because, as Tim alluded to it, a more efficient asset base is what we're all striving, and collaborating together to provide a more efficient use of the asset is important. One of the benefits it was unexpected from my standpoint was we certainly have a very valuable field management, asset management team, and they're quite dispersed, and they're located all over the country. I think one of the soft benefits that we've experienced is, with the deployment of the technology, we can provide a higher quality of life for those folks that are part of our field asset management team, and a higher output from what they're able to return to the business. So by a higher quality life, what I refer to is, a lot of times it's we get up on a Monday, we have a plan in place for where we're traveling to in our geography, our local area, who we're going to hit, what do we expect to get out of those visits. But it's really a crapshoot. They're maybe informed by past experience and maybe just some boots on the ground intelligence gathering. But now, with the deployment of the GPS devices, we have concrete data that says we need to go investigate in this part of our supply chain. Again, whether it's geographically based or customer based. And so we're specific and targeted with our physical resource deployment from a human capital standpoint. And that allows us to be more efficient while we're out in the field. So our team is more productive when they're out in the field. They're more efficient. And ultimately that leads to a higher engaged individual and a higher quality of life for that individual. And so that's a soft benefit that I believe IFCO is received from this, that certainly I wasn't expecting. But it's been quite nice to see.
I really like that answer. That's not an answer I've heard a lot. It's usually focused into it's much better return on investment on our assets. But it's interesting that you highlight how it's now a better work life and more efficiency within the workforce. And there's just a much better work life for the workforce. So that's a really nice answer and a nice addition that has been achieved from this. And Scott, I would love to know, if you could just talk in a bit more detail on how is the technology actually enabling IFCO to do this?
Sure. So, I'm not going to go into too much detail specifically about how they're using our technology. Josh can share that if he wants to. But maybe an imperfect example that I think is relevant is the use of barium sulfate as a contrast agent in the medical community. If you're going to try to diagnose somebody's GI tract, it allows you to light up the entire system, and that's what digitization does. And so again, we thought there was one problem we were solving for reducing theft and damage, and that certainly was diagnosed and mitigated largely. But the same data allowed you to see so much more about the ecosystem that can now enable the benefits that Josh was talking about, as well as increase utilization over time. So you need fewer assets as you grow to do the same amount of work. And we're dealing with millions of these assets there's a real value there. And you can increase the entire cycle turnaround time. So increase the velocity and ultimately service your customers better from it. And even understanding the misuse of assets where if they're not in one of these zones, and maybe it's not because they were stolen, but because somebody's lent it to somebody else, for example, or large volumes of it, then you can bill for that or identify those. So it's a mechanism through time to understand your entire ecosystem and start to stack benefit upon benefit based on solving for that one initial system through, again, the real-time location tracking, and then through that location, dwell time in what area, whether it's a grower or it's a IFCO facility or a store, and then start to measure by chain that you work with, by grower, by geography, et cetera, et cetera. There's a great deal of additional value that this enables.
And
yeah, no, please go on, Josh.
yeah, so Scott, what Scott touches on is really important. I mean, we always have an understanding of other methods of capturing data in our supply chain from a customer standpoint, but certainly having concrete, specific data based on the deployment of a real-time tracking solution on how much time does an asset spend at this type of a grower, whether segmented by commodity, right, or segmented by region, and how much time does it spend at this retailer, and within a retailer, how much time does it spend within a subset of their distribution centers, and then from there within the store network and the reverse logistics networks that a lot of our grocery retailers use. So having that as a baseline, and then it allows us, as Tim alluded to earlier, go back and have database conversations that remove a lot of the emotion from these conversations to say, how can we partner together collaboratively to drive a more efficient supply chain, because it benefits us all. Especially from an IFCO standpoint, our purpose is we're the only RPC pooler that takes its own assets and at the end of their life regrinds them to make new assets. And so for us specifically, it's really important we do a good job managing these assets, because it's just the right thing to do, and it's what we believe in. But again, a collaborative effort where, as Tim mentioned, everybody within that supply chain understands that this is a valuable commodity and an asset that delivers benefit to all of us. And the more efficient that we treat or utilize the asset, and the kinder we treat the asset, the higher performance we achieve, and then the better outcome our customers achieve, because that asset is available in the right condition at the right time for its use to bring us all the fresh produce that we expect to see from our local groceries. So it's really valuable. What Tim had mentioned before, it's a point that shouldn't be lost on us.
Absolutely. And I can see we do have a question, but I am just going to plow in, just short of time, and we will answer that at the end of the webinar. And if we don't have time, we will send out the answer to the question. But I am just going to plow in, as we do have some final few questions, and we will aim to answer that final one at the end. Josh, my final question to you is, how has real-time intelligent data evolved your roadmap?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a couple items. It certainly brought a greater focus to our business on the value of a real-time tracking solution, and what we can achieve beyond just, as Scott alluded to, the initial example of, we understand that there's loss in our supply chain, and how can we identify it and take steps to mitigate it and stop it. And what the benefits that we've received for over the last 3 years with GPS in North America, I think it's allowed us to increase the pace of the investment in digital technology that we have, not only in North America, but globally. We've recently brought on a chief digital officer within the past year at IFCO, and we've taken the better part of a year to create a digital transformation roadmap. And that is rooted firmly in the successes that we've experienced in North America from a digital standpoint, and how can we scale and increase the pace of the deployment of these technologies, not only in North America, but globally, so that the rest of our customers can experience the same value benefits that our North American customers have. So those are the three big recent achievements that we've had through the deployment over the last 3 years of the GPS devices with roambee.
Fantastic. And to you, Scott, how is roambee enabling IFCO to achieve this evolving roadmap?
In multiple ways. So in general, as IoT innovation advances with our own R&D team, inevitably that will impact things such as the form factor of how we can best fit our devices into IFCO and other customers' assets, to include smaller, with a longer battery life, lower cost, more robust, better connectivity, working to deploy edge technology so we can make it even smarter. We are device agnostic, so we do work with partners as well, and there's some exciting technology out there at the edge. Accessing additional sensors as well. Right now we're talking about location, but ultimately we believe there is a use for things like temperature and humidity sensors that we have available as well, at least within a targeted environment. Deeper integration with other technologies. So RFID is a very common technology used within the industry now, and we think there's a lot that can be done to be able to integrate and connect real-time IoT with RFID and get even more information. And then ultimately, and probably most importantly, more advanced predictive and prescriptive analytics and making more actionable signals in output for our customers to improve their business processes ultimately. Thank
you. And I'm going to do the final question to you, Tim. I feel like you can take us home. And we've got IFCO in front of us today, who has found the missing piece in their supply chain. How do we enable the industry to find it too?
Absolutely. I think there's two areas, at least from an industry viewpoint, that are important and areas that we're actively engaged in. And one is education, and in a variety of different fronts related to packaging. We're kind of in this reuse revolution that's really at a starting point. And it goes well beyond packaging, and you hear about going from, say, a linear to a circular economy. It's really changing thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors as far as what packaging is, from a disposable to something that creates value and has lasting value. And this is something that's going on all over the world as people are looking to tackle solid waste generation, pollution, of course, other environmental ills, but also trying to drive economic performance in their supply chain and more engagement with a more socially conscious consumer. And so we're really kind of at the starting point of a shift in which, from an industry view, we can provide the education on real world experiences, to help guide and lead industry into looking and examining what these opportunities are, especially when you're looking at creating supply chain visibility, having more resilient supply chains, and of course more smart and connected supply chains as a result of tech-enabled reusable packaging products. And so we've got to continue the education front. The other, I think, is part of the industry work on this is more broader coalition building. And that's something that does impact what we're currently doing with other organizations as far as advocating for certain policies to be able to drive forward investments and drive security of these products that are moving goods through supply chains. An example is making sure that state extended producer responsibility laws perhaps can bring funding to help with operational infrastructures, can provide the civic civil penalties associated with theft and more deterrence through criminal and law enforcement actions. And really this is beyond just the packaging industry. It's the recyclers who are responsible and are looking for making sure that resin that they have as source material is coming from legitimate sources, and working across the industry making sure that we can build broader support for asset management as it relates to that more recognition of these valued products in business, and the fact that we need to keep them moving for resiliency, which of course is a very big takeaway as a result to current supply chain constraints and post-COVID environments. So it is something that the industry, working in concert with the leadership of companies like roambee and IFCO. And in fact, I'll just maybe conclude my remarks is that I'm so encouraged to hearing the success stories. There is not a more complex reusable packaging supply chain than fresh perishable fruits and vegetables, other perishable items. And the fact is that, as Josh outlined the model, is that there are like 4 major touch points, and 3 of them do not own the containers. When you look at the grower shipper, the retailer, the reverse logistics providers, and then you've got the center manager. In fact, so when you have those touch points that have no, let's say, financial responsibility, and you've got product moving in different seasonal times out in the middle of farms operations going from West Coast to East Coast. It is very comforting to see these types of inroads taking place from asset management and the layering of technology to produce that visibility and performance. And so, I encourage everybody who's maybe listening on this webinar, when you're looking at your own supply chain, if you think about what the success story that IFCO is able to achieve as an example in that very complex environment, that if you had more A to B back to A distribution, it should be a much more simpler approach to take. And so it's great to be able to see that that problems are being solved, challenges are being overcome in the most complex scenarios with reusable packaging. And I think that goes a long way as far as many other businesses and supply chains that perhaps have more control over their systems and their touch points in handling these types of reusable packaging products.
Fantastic. Tim, I knew you were the person to take us home on the end. It's that banana power.
It is.
It's the power of the bananas. That's why eat your vitamins and eat your bananas.
Keep that potassium coming.
Yeah. Shailesh, we will answer your question in post webinar. Any questions that weren't answered, we will send them out next week. So don't worry, they will get answered. And thank you to all the speakers and the audience today for joining us. I feel we unpacked a hidden gem in the industry today, and more conversations to have. We will be emailing out the recorded webinar next week, and we will be emailing out all the Q&A answers. So do keep an eye on your email inbox. And I do encourage you to share it with colleagues you think will find value from it, and share it with within your workplace.